May 2025, two nuclear-armed nations fought a 4-day war and stopped. A new pope was elected from the Americas for the second time in 12 years, and Britain and the European Union sat down together for the first time since Brexit to decide whether they wanted to be friends again. Three events that asked the same question from completely different angles: how much does the old order still hold? It began on April 22, when gunmen opened fire on Hindu tourists in the Pahalgam Valley of Indian-administered Kashmir, killing 26 people. India blamed Pakistan-based militant groups. Islamabad denied involvement. The attack triggered a 2-week countdown that would end with missiles crossing one of the most dangerous borders on Earth. On May 7, India launched Operation Sindoor, a coordinated missile strike on what New Delhi described as terrorist infrastructure inside Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The targets included sites linked to Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. The strikes were precise, targeted, and unmistakably a declaration that India was willing to cross a line it had held for decades. Pakistan responded. Artillery exchanged fire along the line of control. Both nations deployed drones against each other's military installations. The first time India and Pakistan had used drone warfare against one another. Pakistan struck Punk and Jammu, killing 16 civilians. The conflict had the structure of escalation and the logic of mutual assured destruction hanging over every exchange. What made the 4 days between May 7 and May 10 so significant was what did not happen. Two nuclear-armed states fought a limited military exchange and chose to stop. As Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio worked both sides through the night. On May 10, the Directors General of Military Operations communicated by hotline and announced a ceasefire. The guns went quiet. The strategic logic on both sides was clear. India needed to demonstrate consequence without triggering general war. Pakistan needed to respond without inviting a scale of retaliation it could not absorb. Both governments had domestic audiences to manage. The ceasefire was not peace, it was a mutual decision that the cost of continuation outweighed the cost of stopping. For now, Kashmir has been a fault line since 1947. 3 wars have been fought over it. Both countries have nuclear weapons. What May 2025 demonstrated is that extreme military capability and extreme political restraint can coexist, but only as long as both sides choose restraint simultaneously. That is not a structure, it is a gamble that resets with every provocation. While South Asia held its breath, in Rome the Catholic Church was completing the ancient ritual of choosing its next leader and producing a result that no one in the College of Cardinals' 2,000-year history had seen before. The papal conclave opened on May 7 and required 4 rounds of voting. On May 8, white smoke rose from the Sistine Chapel chimney. The name announced to the crowd in St. Peter's Square was Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, an American-born Augustinian who had spent decades working in Peru. He took the name Leo XIV. The choice was historic in a precise way. No American had ever led the Catholic Church in its 2,000 years of existence. The United States had always been considered too politically prominent, too tied to a superpower identity for the papacy. The cardinals chose one anyway. Prevost's biography complicated the simple American narrative. He was born in Chicago, but his adult life had been spent largely outside the United States in Rome, in Peru, where he served as Bishop of Chicloyo for nearly a decade and became a Peruvian citizen. The man elected was technically American, but had made himself a man of the global South, in the same spirit as his predecessor. The name Leo XIV carried its own signals. The last Leo was Leo XIII, who served from 1878 to 1903 and is remembered for his social teaching, particularly the encyclical Rerum Novarum, which addressed the rights of workers and the obligations of capital. In choosing that name, the new pope was placing himself in a tradition of engagement with the material conditions of human life. The questions facing Leo XIV are the same ones that defined Francis's papacy and were left unresolved: the role of women in the church, the pastoral response to lapsed Catholics, the ongoing fallout from the global abuse crisis, the accelerating decline in attendance across the Western world. A new pope does not inherit a clean slate, he inherits a long argument that was already in progress. What the conclave had chosen was a man shaped by both the world's most powerful country and its most overlooked continent. Whether that combination produces the reformer the church's left-wing hopes for, or the stabilizer its right-wing needs, is a question the papacy will answer over years, not announcements. The cardinals made their choice. History will decide whether they chose correctly. And on the same day white smoke rose over the Vatican. Across the English Channel, the United Kingdom and the European Union were preparing to do something they had not done in 9 years: sit down together at a summit table. On May 19, the UK and EU held their first formal joint summit since Brexit took effect. Prime Minister Starmer and Commission President von der Leyen signed a new strategic partnership covering defence, trade, fisheries, energy, and border security. Both sides called it a new chapter. The occasion was the first formal admission, from both parties, that the separation had produced costs neither had fully anticipated. The most consequential element was defence. Britain was admitted to the EU's Security Action for Europe Fund, a €150 billion mechanism designed to rearm the continent. For the UK, this meant access to European defence procurement on terms unavailable since the Brexit vote. For Europe, it meant the continent's most capable military was formally back inside the tent. The fisheries deal extended reciprocal access until 2038, a 12-year framework replacing the annual uncertainty that had plagued fishing communities since 2020. The Food Standards Agreement reduced the friction on agricultural trade that had been one of Brexit's most concrete economic costs. These were practical gains, measured in boats and border crossings, not diplomatic symbolism. The summit was made possible by a specific political moment. Brexit had been delivered by the Conservative Party. Labour under Starmer had no tribal attachment to defending its terms. The geopolitical context, an unstable America, a threatening Russia, an assertive China had made European cooperation feel less like a political choice and more like a strategic necessity that could no longer be deferred. The critics from both sides were immediate. British Brexiters called it a betrayal, a return to EU rules without EU representation. European federalists complained the deal fell short of re-entry and locked the EC into an associate relationship. Both critiques were probably right. The summit was not a reversal of Brexit, it was a management of Brexit's consequences, the acknowledgement that a clean break had turned out to be neither clean nor break. What May 19 represented, stripped of its political framing, was an acknowledgement on both sides that the separation of 2016 had produced costs neither had fully anticipated. The question was no longer whether Britain and Europe needed each other, it was how much they were willing to admit it. The answer arrived in the form of a joint statement and a defence fund and 12 years of fishing rights. 3 events, 1 month, 2 nuclear states that chose, this time, to stop, a church that elected its first American pope and bet that geography was no longer destiny, and 2 former partners rebuilding the relationship they had loudly ended 9 years earlier. May 2025 was a month about what survives after the rupture and what the cost of pretending it didn't happen turns out to be.